Welcome to the Veriditas Podcast, where we explore heterodox thoughts on politics, sex and culture with an exciting lineup of guests. I am your host, Dr. Petra Bueskens, and I'll be asking guests, what is it that distinguishes this political and cultural moment? Why isn't the world making sense anymore? What is reality in an algorithmically driven world? How can we regenerate our psyches and societies?
Oh, yeah, I just saw that. I went into your Substack and just saw that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm.
And that's a spiritual book, is it? That's what I garnered. You're talking about spirituality there. Yeah.
I do.
Okay. Well, hopefully we can touch on that too. Okay. All right. So for the listeners who don't already know your work, Jacob Nordangård, is that how I pronounce it?
Jacob Nordangård.
Nordangård.
Yeah, that's good enough.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's a Swedish author and researcher with a PhD in science and technology studies. He has written 6 books about the historical roots and development of the global management system. I like that term. That has manifested itself in recent years. He is the founder of Stiftelsen Feros, sorry about my pronunciation, and Feros Media Productions. He is also the frontman of the heavy metal band Wardenclyffe. So I kind of like that you're bringing together PhD studies with heavy metal.
Yeah, that's kind of unusual, I guess.
It's very unusual. Tell me a bit about that. Was your true love heavy metal and then you were going to do a conventional career and then went back again? Or how does that work?
Kind of. When I was a teenager, at first I was very much, as a child, I was very much into geography. That was my passion, and studying maps. And then I went into it was not easy to get girls in when you were a teenager. If you said, I study maps, it was much better to be a musician. So play guitar. So I started to play guitar and started a band, and I had big plans for this, and so I started with this in the 80s and released an album in 1993, and we had close to a breakthrough in our community, of course, the heavy metal community in Sweden.
So is it the doom metal band? I listened to a little bit of that was on your Substack. Is it the band called the Doomsday Cult?
No, this is a band called Captor.
That's before, right? That's
before, but it's in the 90s. So, and actually this year we had a re-release of this record by a Chinese company on vinyl, because in 93 it was nobody released vinyl records at that time. So
CDs by then.
So it's kind of it was really cool that someone in China thought that this album was great, because at the time we released it, that's because my career in music ended. The company that released this in 93, they went bankrupt and they closed business, and this record didn't get the distribution, and I got tired of it. I have spent a lot of years with this and wanted to become this musician, and didn't work out. I was out of a band 1 year later, and was thinking of what should I do with my life. So I started to, and I lost my work as well, because this was in Sweden in the early 90s. We had this economic downturn, a lot of layoffs with jobs at that time. And so I thought I have to do something. So I started doing studies.
So that's when you started the PhD?
No, I started I wanted to go to university because I had dropped out of school.
Oh, yeah, you were a rock star. You didn't need the university.
I don't know. But I love to read, and I
Uh-huh.
mean, I have all had this side in me as well.
Mhm.
But now I went back to school because now I wanted to study at the university.
Oh, it's an interesting trajectory. And I thought the doomsday cult stuff seemed prescient to where you were going later when I
Yes.
listened to that about the prospect. It was very sci-fi, a future society where people were automatons and essentially controlled by the machine. And I was thinking, wow, this is now what you write about. There's so often, little indicators of our lives that show
Yeah, it
up
is.
later. And
Yeah.
I find that interesting.
Yeah, and when I wrote the Captor lyrics in the
Mhm.
90s, I wrote about this as well. The song called Virtual Reality about people getting connected to, and we didn't have internet at that time, but it was, I could see this in the future coming.
Yeah, it's
And
I wrote an honours thesis in 94 on virtual
yeah,
reality too. And it's the same
okay,
thing.
wow,
And
yeah,
it was not in existence, but I also intuited that it was very significant for our society. And I remember reading some of Jaron Lanier's work really early, and then I didn't touch it. I went into motherhood because I became a mother
yeah,
out of wedlock as a very young woman, and that was against my peer group of middle-class university type women.
yeah,
And it changed everything. I ultimately think for the better, but that's another story. But I remember going right into that and then left it and never touched it again. So I know what you mean about that. This sort of, there it is
yeah,
in your prehistory.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
so I was thinking that in a way, your work is about two stories and how they come together. And that's not even factoring in the spiritual book, but the story is the current story of the fourth industrial revolution, or what you call the great coup d'etat. And I think you're right about that in terms of the COVID years being the fundamental shift. And then I think the other story is the backstory of how this came about, because what I think is so confronting and difficult for people to wrap their heads around is how long this has been going for, and this sort of so-called revelation of the method, that there's been white papers and research papers and think tanks talking about what's happening
Yeah,
now for 100 years. And then that's not even going into Aldous Huxley and Orwell and, the way in which it's been discussed in other fora as well, in fiction. So I think there's two stories that you're talking about, and one is the backstory, the Rockefellers and
yeah,
the Rothschilds and so on, and the other is the front story. And I was thinking that they weave together in quite powerful ways. So I wanted to hand it to you, which one we talk about first, because I'd like to talk about both. But in some ways, when we're talking about one, we're always talking about the other.
yes. But I guess the backstory.
Mhm.
Could start with a backstory, or
Yeah. Yeah. Why
yeah,
not?
yeah,
Yeah.
because that's where I started.
Yes. Okay.
I started with the Rockefeller book. That is, it came out in Skyhorse, my American publisher,
Mm.
this year. But I
Mhm.
started to write this story in 2009 as a PhD candidate.
Mhm.
I wanted to know the background to how the climate issue had evolved. And this was
Yes.
a part of my studies at the time with European Union energy policy.
Mhm. Was that your
Because,
topic?
yes, the biofuels policy of European Union, the political history about it.
Okay.
And
Mhm.
because climate change has been very, very important in anchoring the decisions for renewable energy, I wanted to look into the background.
Mhm.
Sweden is very, very big on this,
Mm.
with a lot of pioneering scientists in the climate change story.
Mhm. Yeah, I've learned
So,
that view. I didn't know that independently. I've come across that through reading your work and listening to you talking.
yeah, of course, if you're not an environmental scientist, you won't know this.
I just knew
But
about Greta.
yeah, Greta Thunberg,
Yeah.
and she is related to one of the originators of the carbon dioxide theory, and that is Svante Arrhenius from Sweden. He was at the Stockholm University in the
Right. You
late
did say
19th
that.
century. Yeah.
Mm.
And because I knew those things with Svante Arrhenius, and then I knew some of the names that is big in Sweden. Bert Bolin, he was the first heading the IPCC, International Governmental Panel on Climate Change. And we had these people in Sweden that were very, very, very admired as well. And so when I was doing the study, I wanted to go back in story, and I just didn't want to know who had started this. I also wanted to know who have funded this, what organizations, because I made a network analysis. That was as I would do the studies I was doing.
Network analysis. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, what I read a little bit about in your book, or maybe heard, was that you were trying to say things and then you couldn't, which of course resonated for me as an academic. So you started to cover things about the environment movement. Can you talk a bit about that too?
Yes, of course, because it connects. And I was a member of the Green Party at that time, and went into, as almost every Swede, into environmentalism. And I knew that it was the evil oil companies that were behind every bad thing in the world.
I held that worldview too, and was a member of the Green Party, so I know what you mean.
Yeah. But when I started to investigate this, first I read a book because I was reading about energy policy and geopolitics, and I investigated a lot about the oil market and everything behind it. And then I read a book by William Engendahl called Century of War. And I thought it was a brilliant book, explained a lot about how oil has been a part of major wars during the 20th century. But he had a chapter in this book that talked about how the environmental movement had been funded and almost founded by the very powerful people. That kind of shocked me.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, because I found out that, for example, Friends of the Earth, the radical, really radical environmentalists.
Yeah, go out with their boats and tackle the whalers, and
Yeah, and that's Greenpeace.
Oh, that's Greenpeace.
Yeah,
Friends
that's
of the Earth.
Greenpeace. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, the Friends were even more radical. They had been funded by a very rich oil billionaire called Richard O. Anderson. He was the owner of the Atlantic Richfield Corporation, and drilling oil everywhere in Alaska. And at the same time, as the Friends of the Earth said, that no oil will kill everything. It's evil. And I found these oilmen involved in this, and I was, what? This cannot be true. I was thinking, this cannot be true.
Yeah.
And not the environmentalists. I know these people. They are the good people. But they don't know that they have been played.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it was like a couple of months later, the Green Party in Sweden announced that that's before I joined this party, because they had this, it was the local initiatives that were important for them. We have to have these alternative communities, and I liked that.
And decentralized.
Decentralizing everything. But the Green Party then said, no, we have to join the European Union. And what? Why? We were against this supranational structures, that we thought that this is only the big tech, big oil, all these and all these their lobby groups. They are running the European, essentially. But now the Green Party said we have to join this.
So you're saying the Green Party were against that before because they were pro decentralization, and then shifted gears?
They shifted because of the climate issue. Because of climate change, we have to join the European Union, because we have to be in Brussels. Why? So that's the context when I started investigating the background to the climate change story.
About the way in which climate change trumped all the other issues. So when I was an environmentalist in my early 20s, probably like you, we wanted to save wilderness and climate wasn't an issue, or it was a background issue or one of many, but not the current sort of neoliberal discourse around carbon credits and all this technocratic stuff. So what do you think happened there? Like, how do you track that? Because I think you write about that quite interestingly.
Yeah. Yes. Because we had the anti-globalization movement, and a lot of people I knew were a part of this, and we knew how the bad guys were. But one key point is the Al Gore, Al Gore effect, and inconvenient truth, because that's when things shifted. And
completely. I remember our
completely
said something the day after that film was released. It was like a big deal. Everyone was sort of, it affected me deeply. I was scared.
Yes, me too. I was convinced until I was doing a study about, because first wasn't the background story to those who were involved in the climate issue. The first thing was to actually look into the science, the climate science, because I wanted to know. I wrote a student thesis about biofuels, and in this I wanted to have a background about climate change science. How will climate change affect biofuels production? Because this is what's a geographic study. As I think a scientist should do, and also a journalist should do, you have to look on both sides and present this. So I looked into the Al Gore side, and that was very historical. And then I looked into the other side, and the view was, of course, that all these scientists that say another thing than the official narrative, they are bought by the oil industry.
So you started to track this in Sweden, did you?
Yeah, and first I read an article that it was like, what? What is this? This isn't the things that they are saying. They're saying that this is certain, this is a fact, this is consensus. And that's for one thing didn't resonate with me, because consensus, that's not science. Science is, you don't vote about this. So I was listening to science, and then find out that a lot of this that it was based on was climate modeling. It was modeling the future. And how can you do that? Climate is a very, very complex system. And I couldn't find any evidence. You could no evidence for
support the modeling. You mean it's abstraction, not empirical?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that shocked me as a student. And what? And I talked to a professor that would be my supervisor, one of my supervisors, and said, "Have you read this? I mean, they have no evidence for this." And he was just, no, don't listen to that, because he was himself doing a career on climate change, and had become a director of a climate policy center. He had a lot of money now, so they didn't want to question anything. But I got a position as a PhD candidate after this. And as I had a right background, Green Party and environmentalist, I was alarmed by another threat that was peak oil. Peak oil would run out. So I was the right guy at that moment. They said they didn't have anyone that had such knowledge about energy before.
Okay, so that got you in the door.
So, yes. But then I started this investigation with who were behind climate change. And that led me into the Rockefeller philanthropies.
So when you say behind, do you mean behind the research? Behind who's funding the research? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, who is funding the researchers? it became very obvious that the most important decisions had been made in a place called the Bellagio Center in Italy, that is run by the Rockefeller Foundation.
Okay.
It was a lot of things that had happened at this Bellagio Center, and it was, what is this? So I was supposed to write 5 pages for my PhD thesis about this topic, just to have a brief background, but it ended up in 50 pages. Because I found a lot of stuff going back a long time with how it started in US military research, and then the Rockefeller Foundation took over, and the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. And for me, it was this is strange. Because Rockefeller family is the founders of ExxonMobil.
Yeah, that's right.
That's their company.
Yeah.
And ExxonMobil is the evil company. Every environmentalist knew that. So,
there's a flip there that doesn't make sense, which is why, in some ways, most people can dismiss it. And, I said to you when we were emailing, I've had something with the category of woman. It's the same thing. Very few. Now that movement has been hijacked, so the women's movement, they can't see that there's all this funding for the gender ideology that's smuggled its way in the door. And so that the very category, a woman, is now non-existent. And it's actually not dissimilar. It's the same pattern where the people who want to save the environment, let's say, broadly speaking, get co-opted, their movement is hijacked, and then it becomes actually about supporting big oil.
Yes, and technocracy. Yeah, these technocratic solutions, because that's what I found when I asked myself, why are these people doing this?
That was one of my questions, but now you can answer it. Why are people, what was your research finding around the oil magnates, the oil barons, really, because this is intergenerational. So I actually saw someone when you said he was a literal snake oil salesman. I thought that was funny, Rockefeller Senior. But I guess the 2 pieces there are interesting around the sort of inversion, the ideological inversion and the movement jacking. But the other side is this commodification of nature that seems to be part of it, and the technocratic governance. And so maybe we talk about one and then the other. But so maybe tell us a bit about what you discovered about the Rockefeller family, because it's a great social history you've done as well. It's quite interesting. I've been listening to it on my walks.
And it's very, because I didn't know that much before. I knew about John D. Rockefeller, of course, and Standard Oil, that they were more or less behind the civilization we have now running on oil. They were a big part of this.
And plastics. And,
motorization, and how our cities has evolved, and a lot of things.
It's everything.
But I didn't know how involved they had been in the philanthropy side of it, and how they had founded and funded universities and education, and being involved in, and that's the thing, they have been involved in both sides. They have funded both sides of the scientific problems.
And war.
And war. So involved everywhere. And so that was huge. Wow.
And most people still don't know that. I don't fully know that. I mean, when the university system went to the grant scheme here, I don't know exactly what the case is in Sweden, but I remember saying to colleagues, the ivory tower is really important, but they were so sort of, I guess, dogmatically leftist. They said, but that's elitist. And it's it's supposed to be. So there's a separation of powers. And so that an academic can pursue knowledge as an end in itself and not be hunted by power, by the government. no one questioned this shift to the grant scheme. But the other piece with the shift to the grant scheme was there were only 5 things you could do for competitive grants, which then careers got pegged to. But I didn't know, and I've only really very recently discovered this since the COVID moment, around the funding for this coming from elsewhere, whether it's, managed retreat or transgenderism or the climate crisis, that there's this kind of funding behind it, and it's the same players. So what did you discover? What did you discover there? Because I think your research is important in that space.
Yes, and the Rockefeller family, they are kind of an example of this, because we have other players as well.
Yeah.
Kind of a billionaires network with people that had gotten rich on oil and cars and big tech and so on. And they are all involved in this. It's like when you have reached a certain level, you become part of a club. And you start your philanthropy, your foundation, and this will give you goodwill, but you can also decide what you put your money on. It's like, we don't have to pay tax, but we give to society, but we give to things that we can have, what do you say?
Influence?
Influence, and you can get earnings from it. It's good for business.
Monetize.
Monetize everything you do. So that's the brilliant thing that Rockefeller and his son and their advisors came up with.
Oh, they came up with this philanthropic.
And it was Carnegie as well. Andrew Carnegie was important. And Carnegie and Rockefeller set up this.
And so this is the first generation of Rockefellers. You're saying that the actual oil barons, they created this philanthropic way of, I guess, putting some of their profits, which then gave them a second order of power over the culture industries and over the university, the media, and the culture industries.
And if you control the education, more or less control everything.
Yeah.
Because if you educate people, you educate them with your worldview.
Yeah. Well, we see that with health, but people don't always see it in other areas.
And they had the money at that time. They were the richest people in the world. They could do it, and they could buy the politicians.
Yeah.
And so they started with this. And Rockefeller Foundation they were the ones that gave money to universities. And then the sons, or the grandsons to John D. Rockefeller, the sons to John D. Rockefeller Jr., they started another foundation called Rockefeller Brothers Fund.
Mm-hmm.
And this had another objective or mission. It was for social activism. So the first one gives money to research. The other one gives money to these activist groups.
Sorry to interject. What sort of money are we talking about? Is this in the millions?
Yes.
Mm.
And it was money that came from the Standard Oil companies put into this. And they started early on with giving money to left causes.
Mm.
And at the time, the Rockefellers were Republicans. So they started, especially from the 50s and on, and they have been involved in funding issues. And now they are into a lot of this activist, gender, trans, everything. You just go into the webpage and you find that they give money to all these groups.
So they fund the research, they fund the activism, which stitches it up, really.
Yeah. You control a lot of this. So you control the research at the university when you have activists at the university. Because all these students come and want to be part of something larger than themselves, caught up in the activist groups, funded by the same people. And you control the minds of people. Yeah.
Mm-mm. So I'm interested because in a way, your experience is a microcosm of the macrocosm. So when you start to say to your supervisors, I'm saying that there's funding for this. And I'm assuming you also begin to notice that there are dissident scientists who lose their jobs or get, reputation destroyed or worse, threatened. Do you start to try to write about this back then? When you discover this, you discover that Friends of the Earth are funded by this Anderson, and discover that the Rockefellers are funding the research and the activists. When you start to try to convey what you know, what happens? Because you do have the PhD, so you got through the system.
Yeah. So this is during my PhD studies. And so I start with, I'm doing this working paper called Thoughts Lead into Action about climate. This is in 2009. And I think this is important, but it's scary as hell at the same time, because, oh shit, the American military, big oil, all these people are in this, and this is wow.
It is.
So, yeah, it was scary. So I knew immediately this could be dangerous. This is dangerous knowledge. But I wanted
to do metal thumb stuff.
We come to that later.
Okay. Go on.
So but I want to talk to my colleagues at this climate policy center, and I managed to we have a seminar, and I present this paper with the other PhD students, and they think it's interesting, very interesting, and they say, "Oh, well, this could be good, very good story here." But it's the senior people; they are not that supportive. So one of my supervisors, when I present this, just says, throw it in the bin. I don't think we should have a seminar on this,
So I'm assuming you've referenced everything, and you've got all the receipts within the bibliography. You link to the articles, you link to the research, you link to the funding that's documented. You link to all of that. They don't care.
No, don't go there. It's this kind of study you should do, not this thing. But I thought this is important, This is very important. And my other supervisor, the one that I talked about climate science, wasn't really factual. I don't think he ever read it. He did a couple of years later, but he was so into his career.
Yeah,
he was more interested in having all his PhD students that were writing articles where he could be one named in this as a co-author. That was the important. He was a careerist.
Yeah, I think careerism is the key way the left were captured. The middle class left that have become the chattering classes. Most of them have been captured through their careers because it's comfortable, and then there's a legacy, and then, there's all the perks of having a career and the status and the income. And when people say what happened to the left, that's what happened to the left. They institutionalized and their career. And I have some understanding with how that happens. I mean, those of us who stood up against COVID or stood up against gender or any of these things, we don't have careers, and we're much more financially fragile as a result and marginalized. And there is a cost. There is a cost.
Yeah, it is a huge cost.
It's a huge cost.
Because the thing that happened during these years, it was like, I can't work with these supervisors.
Yeah.
It's impossible. So I decided to have a break with them, and it's I don't know how it's in Australia, but we can change our supervisors.
You can too.
Yeah.
Did you find someone?
Yeah. I found one was my old supervisors when I was studying geography, and he had been supportive and helped me for real. And he was the one that made me apply for this PhD program.
Okay. So he supervised you, did he?
Yeah. So, but the other at the department, it was like, oh no, that's him. He can't be the main supervisor, because he wasn't one of those who were going along with the program. He was kind of more critical. So they wanted another main supervisor for me. But I got one that she was good and supportive, pragmatic.
Mm-hmm.
So but at the time when I said I want to have a break with this, I have to change supervisors. The supervisors they said, you don't have a career after this. We will take away your funding. We will. It was a lot of things going on, kind of a nightmare situation at the time.
It's outrageous bullying of a student by much more powerful or seniors.
Yeah, they are powerful. They could say these things, but with the new supervisors, it was a relief, and I could finish my work, and also got funding for it, so I could continue.
Yeah, which is essential. You know, when people dismiss the kinds of arguments you're making as conspiracy theories, I say, well, if that's all they are, why can't they be presented? Why can't they be published? Why can't we have good faith arguments with the most articulate proponents of these points of view? Because if they're proven wrong, so be it. If it turns out the IPCC models are correct, the worst end, which I no longer think they are, but was very frightened about them for some time, why not have the most articulate people espousing your view or that view engaged in a public debate, even if it's in rarefied journals? But if it's not allowed, and the fact that it's not allowed for me says everything, because it's the same thing that happened in the gender space. I kept hopping as well and changing in order to finish my work on motherhood, because just to talk about motherhood is actually in some ways now, you know, itself radical, which is bizarre, but, you know, because it's parenthood and it's people with vulvas and it just this absolute anguish. It's just thing. And it's the same, it's the inversion. So like you observe actually the destruction of nature, like whether it's wind farms destroying birds or whatever. I see like, you know, women's sports or private spaces that were fought for by feminists 100 years ago.
Exactly.
You know, public toilet movement, that was a big deal. So the women could leave the home and use toilets. Now they have to be shared spaces and we're supposed to pretend that they're shared with other women. It's just a kind of madness to it. But yeah, the ability to debate that is shut down. And so that's what I say to people who are critics. That's fine to be a critic, but why can't there be a discussion so that your point of view can prevail? Because it's not prevailing if there's a law that prevents me articulating my opinion.
Yeah, but that's because they know that they can't win this. So they use ad hominem all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
That's you don't do that as a good scientist.
No.
These people do it all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, and a lot of people that actually, they mean well, but they get triggered.
Yeah.
It's a trigger that comes out. And then when you just hear a word that goes against this narrative, and it's conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Critical. Yeah. That's wrong.
I think also they've got a moral position about it that is fear-based, say in the environment. It's high moral ground in the case of trans women. And so I think what happens is they believe they're on the right side of history. They believe they're righteous, and that then trumps their capacity to talk about it rationally. It's kind of like we're proposing, I don't know, apartheid, and we're not. But that's where I think dissidents get placed, in some place beyond the pale. We're in the Netherlands of bigotry and bias, and you know, I don't agree with that, but that's how we're seen. And so actually can no longer connect, I believe, because there's been a paradigm break between the two positions. And the only way we're seen from their lens is as irrational bigots who want to destroy the environment. I mean, no, they don't even question why we want to. We live here too, you know.
Yeah. Exactly.
I love the forest near my house just as much as you do. You know, so it's kind of absurd, but that's the assumption. And I think that's where the media have failed in their job just so spectacularly. But of course, as you show,
we know how media works today. Yeah.
And in fact, one of the stories that you had, I found because of my own academic background in feminism, and you talked about Margaret Sanger writing these critical articles about the Rockefellers early on because of this horrendous, and I had heard this before, but can you describe what happened in the factory where they shot workers?
Yes, it was, because the Rockefellers were investing in a mining company, and they owned this in Colorado. This is like 1914. So it's early. The Rockefellers weren't especially popular at that time because they had the Standard Oil Corporation and they owned everything, and they used ruthless methods against the opponents.
Yeah.
And
robber barons, weren't they?
They were robber barons, of course. And they had this mining operations, and it was a strike because it was not a good place for people to work, and the conditions were lousy.
Yeah.
But the company that had this were responsible for operations, they sent out people with rifles, and it was like they had their own militia, and they shot and started a fire, and a lot of women and children deceased because of this.
How many died?
I don't know the exact number, but it was a big thing, a big shock for United States.
Oh, yeah. For a corporation to have its own militia, to go in the domestic, I mean, we know this happens in third world countries and it's no better.
Yes.
But to go in the domestic context and open fire on workers, and it's buried, it's fact. I mean, I'd never heard of it. But I also thought it was interesting that because there were big debates about contraception at the time that Sanger was a big part of, that she starts out really critical and then they pay her off a bit and align with the contraception agenda, and then she's no longer critical of them.
Yes. Yeah, because
she was bought off as well.
Yes, she was. Yeah, and the whole Planned Parenthood thing. And it's all about eugenics.
Yeah, it's complex. Of course, I believe in women's bodily sovereignty, but I can see how a lot of these movements have been hijacked. Yeah, but I do believe in women's bodily sovereignty.
Yeah, so, of course. Yeah. That's good things.
And profit, fertility, and motherhood. I think it's quite
important. Yeah, that's important. That's important things. But they have hijacked all these. Now we see the consequences of this, and it's just now it's Weirdmageddon all over.
Weirdmageddon. Oh, I like that term. Yes. Well, maybe we should get to Weirdmageddon, the great coup d'etat, because I think you're absolutely right. And certainly I felt this at the time about the COVID moment as being a categorical shift. So it opens the door to the fourth industrial revolution. Can you talk a bit about that? What you think's actually happened? And where we're going now, and perhaps especially this commodification of nature and futures markets around nature, and the ways in which the carbon credit model or scheme is not environmentalism, but it masquerades as such.
Yes, it does. What has happened with fourth industrial revolution? It has a lot to do with Switzerland and the World Economic Forum. That's a very, very important player, and they were founded in 1970, in operation in 71, and started cooperating with the people from the environmental think tank Club of Rome already in the 70s, and this fused the environmental agenda with the big business technocratic agenda. But we didn't know that at that time, of course. But they have worked since very, very thoroughly. And with World Economic Forum, what I knew about World Economic Forum as late as when I was doing my PhD thesis, and this is 2009, 2012. They have this big meeting once a year. The big players come there with their private jets and helicopters, and they sit and do business.
Yeah, they tell us to reduce
exactly.
Cycle while they fly in the jets. Yeah.
But I didn't know how much things that actually came from them, and how they have been working close with the governments of the world, with their ideologies. That is essentially public-private partnership on a global level. That's the idea. And
can you explain that for listeners who aren't familiar with that?
Well, Benito Mussolini, he he named this fascism.
Yeah.
Because that's the merger between the state and the big corporation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we are witnessing in the world.
Mm.
The big corporations that we as young were against, they now run the show, and they run environmentalism and everything.
Yeah.
And the World Economic Forum has evolved a lot, especially it's like 2012 and 2015. 2015, they have become, they say now, we are the premier organizations for public-private partnerships.
Mm-hmm. So this idea that we're going to be saved by corporations, that we can't vote in or out.
Yeah, we don't need the politicians as we had before. And the politicians now are more or less paid by.
Well, aren't they the young global leaders?
The Young Global Leaders program. Before they had the Global Leaders of Tomorrow, started already in 1992. And a lot of influential leaders have been part of
so it's Macron,
Angela Merkel, for example.
Merkel, Putin. A lot of them were young global leaders. So they've already kind of been seeded with this narrative. They already have come through the WEF system. I mean, I only learned that during the COVID period because we had to understand this new word called lockstep. How was it that every government was identical within a matter of a week? The same language, the same policies, the same, I mean, there were inflections, and it's the same with the gender stuff. Every local council has the same policy. There's no difference. And that was what spurred me on to start asking, what's going on here? Like, why is it identical? We've never had that before. Not like this, not quite. And even the language of rollout. I mean, that sort of terminology, it's technocratic language.
Yeah, it is. And also, was used during COVID. It was also language used in prisons with lockdowns and
and I mean, there were people who used terms like shelter in place, but I found that worse actually, because that's sort of news speak, isn't it? That's a lie, to try to flip the connotation. I think lockdowns were what we were in, but that's what made it so egregious. So why do you think that moment, I mean, assuming that moment is engineered, which I think you and I can agree on is at least in part. I mean, there was this sort of the Agenda 21, Agenda 30, and the sort of that, what happened.
I mean, that's what I've been following in my the Global Coup d'etat book, because that's, I had written the Rockefeller book, and I had written about what's called the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and how this had been planned, and they had these books about it, and all these corporations had invested a lot of money and effort in new policies and new technologies that could be rolled out in case of an emergency. And also finding out that the Rockefeller Foundation had written this report in 2010 with future scenarios for technological development, with a scenario that was eerily similar to what happened in 2020. And all these, and it's a lot of other thing going on that I uncovered during the work with this Global Coup d'etat book. That's preparations for this event.
Event 201. Event 201.
Yeah, Event 201. Yeah, in 2019.
Yeah, that was right before, like a matter of months before.
But I didn't know at the time. In 2019, I had no, because every eye was on the climate. It was Greta Thunberg went to Greta Thunberg, as we say in Swedish. She went to New York, and it was this big climate meeting.
When she went on the boat, was it on the yacht?
Yeah. That was on a boat that actually had been owned by the Rothschilds before.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And money from it was Albert from Monaco.
It was
all these big money. Yeah, it was his team.
Yeah, they didn't cover that in the media, did they? Well, I didn't see it.
No. And a few months before, World Economic Forum and United Nations had this partnership signed.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But I didn't know that because that is covered in media, of course.
Yeah.
But I didn't know everything. Every eye was on the climate change, and so I didn't know when the pandemic hit in 2020. I didn't know the background story. But as soon as I did, I knew, okay, this is how I will do it. I know the background plan. Could just go back and check, and because I have in the Rockefeller book, it's a lot about the environmental agenda, climate change, not so much about the health agenda.
Yeah. Okay.
But I knew a lot about the health agenda because I have studied this. But it was very, very easy to just, okay, I knew where to look for the information.
Well, they brought out the health education like the other forms of education. I did read that in maybe a few other people have researched the way the Rockefellers funded that and the Fleckner report and so on, which meant we all moved away from integrated holistic medicine to the products that they make. Okay. So when did you see that? Like, so you're saying you didn't know at first and not many people did, and we were all blindsided and concerned. And so at what point did you recognize that this was a bit of a psyop and that this was a sort of totalitarian state of exception being declared?
Very quickly. It was within a week.
Oh, that is quick.
Well,
right.
Yeah, because I knew where to look. So it's, okay, you have declared the fourth industrial revolution. Nobody knew about this at the time, but I have written a whole chapter about this and all these technologies that they wanted to roll out. So finding out this and finding out about Event 201, I think I wrote an article already in the end of March.
It published in the mainstream, or you did that on your own?
No mainstream.
Yeah.
I started to cooperate with Patrick Wood in
the technocracy
news. I had sent him the Rockefeller book before, and I'd been in contact with him. So I started to publish there, and it was a great forum for me because I got an international audience after that. And got contacted by people after that all over the world. And as you know, Sweden was a kind of a free haven at the time. Actually, a lot of people came from Europe to Sweden as now here we can breathe, here we can have some freedom.
You could still go to the cafes but it's interesting how that was how that was represented in our media. You know, it was the Swedish experiment has failed, and there were all these headlines. And now that's split, but no one talks about it. There's no integration. There's no sense in which anyone in our country, I mean, we had the longest lockdown in the world. It was utterly
I know.
There was serious violence of the police against the people. But the average person doesn't know that. If I were to talk to people, they don't know it because they just exist in their mainstream media bubble where there's almost nothing. But interestingly, I was talking to a colleague about this today. The catastrophic loss of trust is generic. So while most people don't want to really talk about it or integrate what happened or hold those in power to account, a recent report by the government, a royal commission into the COVID policies, shows a catastrophic loss of trust of the population. So it has had an effect, a dramatic effect. But it's interesting that it's still not part of the mainstream discussion. I mean, it's no longer a surprise, is it? But people themselves are still kind of really struggling, I think, to make sense of what's happened here. So while dissidents are quite awake to what's happened, I think for ordinary people, they know something terrible has happened, but they're not really sure what.
Yeah, exactly. But it has happened a lot since 2020. And a lot of people woke up at this time.
A huge amount, I think.
Yeah, a huge amount.
Yeah, it's still obviously a minority, but there is, I mean, I think it's a paradigm break now in the culture. We're a minority, but we are a substantial minority of people who have woken up to this, is my feeling. But we don't have the apparatus of power. And I think that makes it really difficult because essentially they own the media and the culture industry, so we can't present it except in this cul-de-sac over here called Substack or Locals, or you know what I mean? We're all preaching to the converted, so it's tricky.
It's tricky, but I think we have one thing that is to our advantage. Truth.
Absolutely.
We want the truth.
Yeah.
That's the most important. And these big players, they want to control truth, want to hide the truth. And that's one of the things that I've been talking about before. We talked about the Ludlow massacre and how, and one thing after that, the Rockefellers, it was a crisis. How can we cope with this? We have to change the images of the people we are. They hired Ivy Lee, the PR genius, and he said to them, you have to tell the truth to the public. Sooner or later, they will find out. But the advice, it was for them, okay, when we control what's true, that's how we do it. If we control media, if we control everything, if we control education, we will decide what's true.
Yeah, it's so dark. It's exactly what's happening.
But I don't think it can't work, because truth is absolute. It's a real deal, and as soon as it's almost impossible to stop it when in the end. And I describe this in my actually latest book.
Yeah, I was going to say, because truth and love are paired, and truth and integrity are paired. So inevitably, it's also a spiritual question. And for me, I think that break that happened in Western culture between facts and values, I've written a little bit about this, but that is integral to what the dissident movement is now suturing back together. So we're linking, it seems to me, spirit with science, or we're linking values with facts, or we're linking spirit with mind, you know? Well, so what's your thesis in that book, and how do you interpret that?
Well, I have a chapter called Inevitable in this book, and this is a very special book because it's actually a book that is written for a music album with my band Wardenclyffe. So each chapter in the book is about the lyrics of each of the songs of the album. And I wanted to do this because I think we are threatened as the human family by these technocratic technologies, the artificial intelligence that wants to take away everything, and now even creative works, they want to instead have AI images and AI music and all these. So this was a kind of a celebration for the humanity. Yeah. So I worked with an illustrator that has painted pictures to all of the songs or chapters, and this has a lot to do also with spirituality and creativity.
Which is distinctly human with this,
it is, and the creative force, and experiences that I have had myself during this long journey as an environmentalist, and seeing who are behind this and the shocks that happened for me, and then the spiritual side was awakened within me for real, because it was like in the darkest hours I got help. Things happened, and
can you tell me about that if you feel comfortable? I mean, that's interesting. I think it's something that many people feel. I felt it too. So talk about that, how you got help, or what that looked like in your darkest hour. Was that back early on when you first discovered this and felt this sort of primordial fear about whether you could present this, or was that in the COVID moment or another moment?
No, it was already during my PhD studies, and I had these experiences with kind of a guiding hand and synchronicities happening, but it's just amazing. And it's like I had signs that says, Jacob, you're on the right path. Go here.
Yeah.
And also with meetings I've had with people coming into my life at the right time. And the last song it's about love, love and also truth. Because I had a very dark moment, a bad relationship, and the colleagues at work, they didn't like what I was doing. And one of my colleagues came in and said to me, we have to have another person giving another view at the course you're giving now, because I had this critical perspective, and they became afraid of this.
This is at the university.
It is at the university. I was had my PhD approved actually, and started to work. But this was the end of this period, and actually they didn't renew my contract after this. But it was like shit, everything. It was so much bad things that happened. I had been at a TV interview in Stockholm, where it felt like, because I had published a book called The Doomsday Clock, or The Doomedog's Clock.
I heard you talking to Whitney Webb about that, the Doomsday Clock.
Yeah. And so...
Oh, did you write about how they fostered that whole sense of doom through that clock?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I did.
It's always at 1 minute to midnight, isn't it? Or a fraction.
Yeah, exactly. And my colleagues didn't like this. It was like you are cooperating with the wrong people, and so I was kind of out of everything. I was about to quit my job. I had a lousy relationship that was breaking up, and I felt I was at the bottom at that time. But I started to play music as a way to heal, and I got this connections, and suddenly people started to appear in my life. And an old university professor, he contacted me because I wrote about this the episode in the TV studio where they were very hard on me with questioning everything I said, and it was state television in Sweden.
Felt publicly humiliated in your research.
Yeah, they didn't send this eventually, because I think I did a good defense of myself, but it felt like, what this feels like I'm in Soviet Union and it's questioning Marxism. It was like kind of that. So I was very, very at the bottom, but he reached out and he said, I want to help you. So he helped me with finding a new position, and gave me a prize on 200,000 Swedish crowns. And then I decided now I can do something. So
you got another academic position, or was it?
No. It was as a think tank. This position didn't actually work out, because I decided this time I have to be my own. I have to be my own director. I can't be in the game that other people have set up for me. I want to do this for real, for myself. So I took this money and I said, now I want to write a story about how it was at the university when I found out these things, and also had this artistic side. I had started to write music at the time as a PhD student, with songs that reflected the things I had found in my research. I got angry about certain
so is that
things.
You're still doing heavy metal?
I had to and heavy metal and doom metal. It's very, very good. You can't have happy songs about these things. So it's the anger, So I decided, okay, I will write this book with money, and I will also do a music album.
Uh-huh.
And then when I found other people as well, and there's a lot of things that happened. It's like music came to me as I was. I have a church very close by,
Uh-huh.
and I like to go at the graveyard, and I think it's a place that gives me peace.
Uh-huh.
It's very quiet,
Yeah,
only
yeah.
dead people, Uh, but I could hear these melodies coming to me, these riffs, this music, and I went home and played it on guitar, and just came to me these creative things. So I had an album, and then I started to, and actually the band got a contract with a record company in Germany,
Uh-huh.
and I started to prepare for it. I wanted to have a release event, and then I thought, because it was like, okay, they're taking everything away from me, but so I'm free now.
Exactly.
I can do whatever I like.
Don't you find this characterizes a lot of the dissidents, that for whatever reason they chose to leave, all were pushed out, but they were pushed out because they stuck to their integrity. And then after that sort of proverbial dark night of the soul arises all kinds of interesting connections and creativity. And I think that the research on creativity is very interesting, because more and more they're talking about that we're an antenna. So it's not like something intrinsic. It's that it's about actually clearing your mind and opening your heart, and then whatever you were born to do, if we go really quite spiritual, whatever God within and without decided for you, you can start to hear. And I think those of us who start to hear that and become creative through that often define it as something outside the self that they listen to and found. And I remember hearing something funny about this that conveyed the thought, and it was on another podcast that Prince used to say, I have to stay up and get this song out, because if I don't, Michael Jackson will get it. And it's this, it's this point that actually it comes to you from somewhere else, and we are an antenna, but you need to have an internal stillness. And I think you need to have a sensitivity to and a fierce commitment to truth to even hear it.
Yeah. And I call this the guard net.
The what?
It's the guard net.
The guard net.
Yeah, not the internet, but the guard net, the real deal.
Yeah.
We are all connected to the guard net if we have this.
Oh, the guard net. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
the guard net.
Yes. Yeah.
We could say the good net as well. But you get connected. That's where you get the inspiration. And you also get connected to other people in this net, the real net.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been experiencing after this. And during this time, this year, 2014, it was, I also found my current wife, and a huge help for me. It was like because I had lost my hope to find a partner that really connected to me, and but I found her.
Oh, that's beautiful. And that's the deep relationship that holds us. So, that's so fundamental, that sense of containment that partnership brings.
Yeah, and she had all these things that I was searching for. And she came to me and asked me, actually, a couple of years before, she had written to me at the forum, on an internet forum, and because I had written about the climate change story. And she said, wow, you really got this. This is such a good timeline, because it had resonated with her, because she was angry that they had decided to ban the old light bulb, because she was a lighting consultant and a color consultant.
These blue lights are terrible for us.
She couldn't understand how could they just ban this, and she was angry about it, and she wanted to know more, and that connected us. And this in 2014, we finally had our meeting, because she contacted me. She had read this also when my experience about in the TV studio. And she wanted to meet me, and we met a couple of months later, and I had heard this song at this time, the song Inevitable. And I thought about inevitable is a movement when you can't avoid, because I said earlier, now I want to be free. I no relation. I just want to do whatever I like. No relationships anymore. I just want to have fun. Maybe have a mistress or something. But
it's not independent. It's counter-dependent. That position.
Yeah.
You don't need anybody I'm hurt, as opposed to I'm open to meeting someone. Yeah.
Yeah. So and I thought, if it's cannot be avoided, it's the right thing. And she couldn't be avoided. It was like we had, and it's just exploded after this. And actually, it was the thing. I was planning to do a show with my band, a big event to celebrate the album, and she came in just 2 months before, and we started discuss. And she said, I was working with a rock club in the 80s called Electric Garden. I was also funny because I have a band called Waldercliff, and it's a lot about electricity. So we came together, and so she knew a lot about arranging things. And had a lot of experience, the same experience, and also a love for music and metal music, hard rock, and
that's common in women's music taste, too. That
no, but it was just wow. So
she brought it up.
Really resonated, and things just exploded out of this, and also together we have worked with all my books now. Now it's 7 books, not 6 books anymore, but 7 books.
Well, you've got a theme, and in a sense, that's core, isn't it? But I think also there's something around that nature, God, whatever you want to call it, abhors a vacuum. It abhors a vacuum, and so when you leave everything behind, it actually provides very space for new things to come in.
Yes.
You might have ignored that letter had you not, in some ways, been thrown out into the ether and feeling bruised and battered. But also, I think when we talk about listening, and you go into the graveyard and hearing the songs, and I go to the garden to hear what I need to do. And it's everything. It's about writing. It's about who I should contact, but also what my children need. If I'm just in the intensity of life, I can't get that. So I have to have pure stillness, and then ideas come, and they can be just really boring ideas about where to plant a tree or what to do, but they can be quite big ones too, like mapping out a book project or pursuing relationship. And I hear you and feel that too, that whatever that is. And so I think we need to talk about that more, because for a long time, Naomi Wolf says this in her book about, she's written a book about the spiritual side of COVID, and just that forever a kind of progressive, educated liberal couldn't mention God or spirituality. Like there's a kind of flaky new age over there, and there's a boring go through the motions traditional church version over here. But
exactly,
where is this integrated understanding that spirituality or religion is core to the human being? And it's core in quite prosaic ways. I think people assume it means this sort of formal religion, but it's in things like what you said, the sort of download you got at the cemetery, or the intuition that you often feel about this or that. That is actually...
That's real spirituality. That's the real thing. And being in contact with the Godnet.
Yes. Yeah, so, I like that.
Yeah, so the theme for this concept was conspire to ignite. Let's conspire to ignite. And that's to bring people together, because I had this idea coming. How do we solve this? We have to bring together the minds. Those in the Godnet has to come together to start a change. And that's what I've been witnessing since with 10 years. I was alone first, when more and more people. I got in contact with people all over the world now, and it's
even in Australia.
In Australia, a couple of people from Australia. There's a lot of people that's interesting in my work in Australia, and maybe because what you had to endure during the pandemic, and but it's been fantastic, and suddenly people that I thought high of. This is wow, this researcher is contacting me and saying, I followed you for years. but I think we are reaching a kind of a tipping point.
Yeah, I agree.
With people come together. We don't have to be everyone, but when we are enough people, other people will start to will happening things around us.
Mm. And I think a part of it too is this, the way you said this researcher that you'd been following said, I've been following you. There's something, the Christian idea, I think there's valuable insights from different religions, but let's say that anchors our human rights framework in the West is fundamentally about each person is divine. And that's, it means actually no longer worshipping people with power, I think, even if that's just local celebrity through to really significant. And so I too have made some connections with people that I've known for years that have a certain fame through this. And actually that's no longer important. It's just not important because it's a human to human connection. And that's part of the sort of digital twinning world. That's part of the fake world. But actually connecting with a human being, it's a cross, how we saw this movement encompasses the working class from the farmers and truckers and, through to people, an absolute minority in the culture industries. But I think that this spiritual piece that's waking up in our movement is also about each person is divine, each person. And I think that actually negates some of the cult of fame that we've seen maybe since Hollywood, but also that happens in neoliberal career structures. I'm not saying that hierarchy has no place, because it does, and some people are better at some things than others, or that valid competition doesn't have a place. But there's certainly, I think there's something happening in our movement that subverts the idea that if you've got more followers or more likes or more media time, that makes you more important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's this reconnection with God, because when there is no connection to something higher than the self, then only those materialistic things matter.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I think on that note, Jacob, we've been going an hour and a half.
Okay.
We'll wind up. I'm inspired to read your most recent book on spirituality, and thank you for coming on. It was really wonderful and interesting to talk.
Thank you for having me on. Yeah.
I appreciate that. So where can people find you? I'll link to the articles you've talked about and to some of your research. So I might send you an email to get some of that information. Where can people find you to pursue your work, and maybe your musical work and your writing work?
Yeah, I have a web page, jacobnordangård.se, and it's in Swedish and English. So, and on that page you can find some interviews, you can find my music, you can and my books as well.
Right.
So I have this new book, Temple of Solomon, and it's it's a very, very limited edition. So if you want it, it's you have to grab it now.
Okay, all right. Buy Jacob's book, Temple of Solomon. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be in touch. I'll let you know when this is up, and you can post it or put it out there if you want to, but I'll let you know. I'm getting a bit of tech support with putting a bit of music together, so I'll email you about that. Thank you, Jacob.
Yeah, okay. Great.
Okay.
Great
Bye-bye.
talking to you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.